You're listening to Wild Culture, a podcast discussing consumer culture and the powerful influence of business strategy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I was looking at the audience profile today and, because I love audience profiles, I love consumer profiles. So I wanted to understand mine a little bit better and understand who you are a little bit more. And I kind of found it mind-blowing. I discovered that I've got listeners mostly in the US and Japan, followed by Australia and Vietnam and South Korea. So hi, wherever you're listening in from. I found it mind-blowing to discover that I have people listening at all, but listening from different corners of the world. So thank you for joining me as I do these ramblings over a microphone. If you've got questions that you want me to answer, please send them to me so that I can talk to things that you want to hear. That's really important to me. I know that's probably really important to you, and there's probably questions that you have. So fire away. I feel like this should have been the very first episode of Wild Culture that I ever recorded. But I had an epiphany the other day, and it was kind of simmering away for a while, but it didn't hit me straight away. It hit me after two entirely different conversations that happened roughly 3 weeks apart. The first conversation was with Kim Wenzel on her podcast, 10,000 Tabs. Kim is in the US. I'm in Australia. But we share a massive similarity in that we've both followed creative and entrepreneurial nonlinear career paths. The second conversation was with a friend of mine here in Australia who has followed a very linear path. And it was during that conversation that my friend and I realized we have something not in common. She told me that she never felt brave enough to change direction in her career because she was terrified she'd break her career if she did. And I sat on that for a few days, and that's when it clicked. So here's the epiphany I had after those two conversations. The world is in desperate need of innovative solutions. And this shows up nowhere more than in modern consumer culture. So that is the way that we spend, the way that we earn, the ways that we try to save. But all of that exists because of what's happening in our personal lives. It is a reflection of human behavior, which is why in customer strategy, we treat variation in consumer habits as perfectly normal. Yet despite what the world needs in terms of innovation in business and in understanding consumers more and being in touch with them, so much of hiring culture that is trying to get the right people who deeply understand and get consumer culture still expect leaders to have perfect, meticulously curated, uninterrupted 30-year corporate paths. It makes no sense. It is a nonsense proposition that we're hiring like that for a world that is trying to revolutionize what it is. And if you think about that nonsense really deeply, you realize just how deeply nonsense it is. Consumers aren't exclusively living linear lives. They change brands because they move houses. Maybe their suburb prefers jeans as opposed to activewear. They change habits because they have children. They doom scroll to avoid cleaning. They go out to avoid cleaning. And they go to Bunnings to buy coffee. An employee who is sat in the same exact industry, climbing the same exact corporate ladder for 30 years, sees non-linear patterns in consumer culture differently, and not from a place of lived experience, because they are not living that variety of life that we collectively study and call consumer insight. What I know from being in business, being around very clever people and driving ambitious innovations, is that innovation requires people who do not think the same, people who are brave, people who have shown that they can and will move in different directions. Because innovation comes from a place of divergence, and that's the ability to think and do things differently. It's not just saying you can think differently. It's actually doing the things differently and being able to show that you can do that. That's not me speaking either. That is the science of how our brains and our behavior work. So when hiring managers are looking for a perfect linear line in a career, they are actively selecting against the very neural processes required for innovation and that would enable that business to be innovative. You fundamentally cannot build something and call your approach holistic if your mind is linearly wired. It hasn't thought big enough. It's following the same track over and over. You cannot say you have a curious mind if you aren't out there exploring different solutions. You cannot say your corporate value is to be courageous if you are just playing it safe. You have to demonstrate creativity. You have to demonstrate bravery. I can tell you about that bravery firsthand and what's involved in it. If you go and look at my professional profile, you'll see a very cohesive story. But what that doesn't show you is that I had children along the way. I had 4 children. 4. And during that 7-year window of having babies, the world didn't stop for me. But the career I thought I was going to have had to change because I was working crazy. I'm talking crazy 42-hour days. I had my own consultancy that I was growing. And if the client said jump, I'd have to jump. And that kind of working lifestyle wasn't going to cut it with a baby. So I had to figure out who and what I would need to become to make that work. And the skill I knew was highly transferable in business was my ability to get inside the minds of consumers. Because every business will fail if it doesn't have consumers. And where I was really lucky in building that skill set is that my mum is an expert in relationship building and sales. So growing up and even now, talking about consumers is something we really connect on. And on the other side, my dad was a CFO. So I am really lucky to have gleaned the best of both their minds. And because building consumer cultures and studying consumer cultures is my expertise, I can tell you with 100% confidence that people who are high in empathy, good at reading scenarios, good at communicating, those are the best people to hire to build connection and trust and engagement with consumers. And if you look inside any marketing or advertising or tech development agency environment, what you'll find is a bunch of brave and creative people, many of which took a non-linear career path. That is what makes their brain a perfect fit for interpreting and studying and understanding what consumers want. It's because they've worn many different shoes. They've walked many different paths. They've moved, they've traveled, they've embraced, and they get it. They get what it feels like to be in situations. And that makes it easier for them to empathize with their consumer. So non-linear people are great at having that holistic, global perspective that modern consumer needs now to be successful. Now, I'm not saying that linear people cannot ever get great perspective. They are amazing with depth in their chosen subject matter. That is their superpower. So, for example, someone who has only worked in finance will understand that world better than anyone. And I think we can all agree that you only ever want to be dealing with an expert in finance for financial matters. That's the perfect fit. What I am saying is that non-linear people, their mind, their life has been open to different scenarios that help them to relate and to be relatable, which is a real gift when it comes to identifying a need to innovate and understanding what consumers want now or next. But what I know from my background is that being brave and becoming non-linear, and that's whether you're building a business or having children or developing strategies that will get you from wherever you are to wherever you want to be, and getting consumers to love what you've created. Sometimes that doesn't always come from a desire to be brave or to be some, big hero in your own story. Sometimes it comes from pure necessity or a do or die moment. And figuring that out alone is incredibly tough. And there are a couple of different people who I know are figuring it out alone. And maybe this is you right now if you're listening in. Maybe for you, that means you're having children and you're trying to figure out how to make literally work around raising your babies without using less of your brain. Or maybe it means you are wanting to grow, but your boss is holding you back and they're hoarding knowledge and they're preventing your access to information and it's stifling your growth. And you don't have other supportive people or a workplace mentor to help you through that. Or maybe you're wicked creative and you're trying to start a business around that and trying to build something out of nothing, but you've got nobody in your circle who has done that before. Or maybe your career didn't go the way you thought it would. Maybe the market shifted and the jobs just weren't there, and maybe you were made redundant because a lot of people have been laid off in the last 12 months and that forced you to change. Now you want to know how you can keep going, keep going and build on what you already have. Those people who are figuring those things out alone, that are moving in that non-linear career sphere, they fit right in with modern consumer culture. You're going to get it. You're going to get what consumers are interested in. And if you're nodding your head when you hear that because you feel like you get it, I just want to say welcome, because you're the people I created this podcast for. And you're the people that are moving through the scenarios that other people might not necessarily get to experience in their life. And they're the things that sometimes are the things that we equate to shitty times. And they're the things that make this so lonely. And I want to bring these up because this stuff, this list, this is the reason why what you're doing is brave. And it's the reason that you're having to fight through those situations. Those scenarios that you're working through, those shitty times, are exactly the reason why it's brave. This is the list of things that you're probably fighting through. You know, people think that it's the kids. It's not the kids. It's never the money. There's always money. There's always work if you want it, if you go looking and you're prepared to do it. It's not the work. Those things, they're sail-throughable. They aren't what makes what you're doing brave. It might be that you have to move to find work, but it's mostly the soul-searching and the thinking and the self-analyzing and the rejection and the self-doubt and the spending too much time in your own head. It's not having anyone to call on as a work reference when you have time off with your babies. It's the boss and the emotional toll that it took when they hid the information from you. It's being on the receiving end of apathy time and time again. It's the feast and the famine. It's not having anyone to ask and having no one else but yourself to trust. It's the grief that comes with letting go of who you were and the comfort of where you were, and the discomfort of finding your new self and growing into it. That mental stretch from a place of change, a place of loss, and into confidence is what builds you into a real trailblazer. That's what makes non-linear people brave. And guess what consumers are attracted to? Trailblazers. The hiring world is geared up for all of us to shrink and for all of us to just sit in a production line. Non-linear people defy that mode of operating. And that's what helps them understand consumers. And that's my point. And that's why I created this podcast. So if you're following a non-linear career path, know that the perspectives you've seen, they are what makes you great. And that's it for today. Till next time. Thanks for listening in to Wild Culture. If you found value in our conversation today, please make sure you follow or subscribe to the show wherever you listen. Taking a moment to leave us a quick rating or review is the best way you can help other curious strategists and passionate spenders find us as well. Bye for now.